Friends, we are really glad to have you today for this session. This seminar is organized by Alia Polatran, Agathe Guy, and myself, Irène Mestre. So today, Arnaud Caiserman will share the research he and his team have been conducting on food security in the mountains of Central Asia. Dr. Caiserman is a senior research fellow at the University of Central Asia, and he has a broad training in physical geography with an emphasis in spatial analysis using advanced remote sensing methods and geographic information systems. During his PhD, Arnaud explored how farmers from the Mardasht Valley in Iran and from the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon adapt their cultural practices to socio-economic and climate change. His current research explores, among others, how climate change can affect food security in mountainous areas of Central Asia, especially Tajikistan. After 7 sessions of our seminar focusing on social science and humanities understanding of food in Central Asia, we are really glad to deepen further our multidisciplinary dialogue with today's presentation. So please, Arnaud, the floor is yours. After our presentation, I will have like a few minutes for discussion, and then we will open the floor for questions. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Great. Thank you, Irène. And yeah, I would like to thank everybody for the invitation today. This is great. It's the first time I have such a seminar with you. So it's a real pleasure. And it is an opportunity for me to introduce a little bit of what we've been doing at the Mountain Societies Research Institute, which is an institute based in Pamir, Tajikistan, but also in Tian Shan. It's part of the University of Central Asia. And the idea of this presentation is to showcase a little bit of what we've been doing. It's not only my research, it's everybody's research in it. So there are some things for which I'm a specialist and some other things for which I'm not, but we'll see that with the slides. But in short, the approach that we like at MSRI is to have this downstream to upstream approach of things, especially of food security. All of us, at the Mestre, which is a team of 12 scientists, we all look at water security and food security from different perspectives, climate change, hydrology, or migration, let's say. But every time we sit together around the table, we always come with the same idea that there are links and challenges which go from downstream to upstream and upstream to downstream challenges. So the idea here is to have a little tour, or sort of a hike, if you wish, from downstream, what are the food security related challenges in Central Asia, to upstream, where are the water sources coming from. So I hope you can see my second slide. If you don't, please let me know, and I will try to fix that. But when we talk about food security in Central Asia, we first must understand that Central Asia is very unequal from a food security perspective. So we call it the block of Central Asia, but within this block, we have very different realities. You have, for example, Kazakhstan, which has a rate of undernourishment of less than 2.5%. So this is really low for the region, because within the same region of Central Asia, you also have countries such as Tajikistan, or if you want to include it, Afghanistan, with around 20% of undernourishment rates. So we're already talking about very different realities, and for that specific reason, we will need to understand that when we want to address, if we can, food security, there is no unique answer to all of the countries at once. We need to adopt a holistic approach and understand that the threats are multiple. However, the nice thing I would say about Central Asia is that they have one thing in common: the solution, actually, to food security: mountains. I will not go through a geography course again, but we all know that Central Asian countries are strongly, heavily covered by mountains, and this is where precisely the water comes from, right? These are the headwater, which helps to irrigate the cotton, the wheat, and many other types of cultivation downstream. So yes, there are challenges for food security in Central Asia, but there is also a solution thanks to its geography and its cryosphere and water resources, as we will see. But this is not enough. We need to adopt a very, like I said, holistic approach when we want to try to understand what is affecting or impacting the food in or security. And I try to classify here, you know, per group, the factors which we must look at as geographers or as scientists if we want to understand those challenges. First off, we have long-term climate change effects. As you know, it's not a secret anymore. We have droughts, but also cold waves, which can affect the yields. That's something that we'll see a little bit in details in a few slides. But in this pack of climate change effects, there is also all these changes that we observe in the cryosphere. So the glaciers, the snowfall, and the permafrost. And this is where I would say Mestre is the most active, because this has a strong impact on the food and water security. So that's one pack of stressors, if we want to understand food insecurity in the country, and we'll dive into it step by step. Of course, we have a second block of agriculture and biodiversity loss, soil and land degradation, as you well know, unsustainable practices, and also questionable crop choices. That's something I will dive a little bit into details in few slides. So climate, agriculture, and another block of stressors impacting food security, which is often overlooked, are the natural hazards, or the risk, if you prefer, like debris flows, landslides, avalanches, and floods. And in this presentation, I will showcase a little bit of the work we've done, explaining how this, apparently unrelated events can indeed affect the food security. And of course, last but not least, anthropogenic factors, land cover changes, increasing population in remote areas or landlocked valleys, and also lack of labor due to migration can be also can also have an impact on the food security. So let's dive into those blocks, and I would like to start with what seems to us the most important point and the main reason of food insecurity in the region. It's actually related to water, and I'm sure you all know these figures. Irrigation efficiency in Central Asia is only 30%. So it means that the infrastructures for canalization and irrigation network are really degraded and old from USSR time, which means that the flow of water from the cryosphere upstream to downstream on the fields in Fergana, let's say, uh, are leaking, and we lose 70% of the water. So that's always the first problem which comes first. We do have water, although we have changes in their regimes, as we'll see, but there is a very major issue related to water infrastructure and management. So to address this, very significant investments are needed, of course, but this is a must because, like I said, we do have water. We just need to use it better, because there are often assumptions that there is less and less water. It's partially true, but most of the problem comes from here: irrigation efficiency. That's an illustration of irrigation inefficiency, actually, where you have a natural stream at very high elevation, which is being diverted here and there, left to right banks, to irrigate different plots. And the more you do that, the more you lose your water, actually, because in this particular case, this is in Murgab, eastern Tajikistan, the farmers have diverted so many times the natural stream that at the end, the stream itself disappears. So when you go down there in the valley, at the back of this picture, you don't see actually the river reaching the stream reaching the main river. It's because this was diverted too many times, and there is a loss of water. So that's a simple illustration. Related to water and food security, as you all know, in Central Asia, we cultivate wheat, maize, rice, fruits, vegetables, and cotton. And these are real crop choices that are, triggered by their incomes. In lowlands, so like I said again, Uzbekistan or Fergana or Dangara in Tajikistan, we cultivate this cash income cultivations. So this is a strategic choice for food security or for profitability. But at the same time, whenever we analyze the crop choices, we always must question their water demand, especially in arid to semi-arid areas. In the case of cotton, 7,000 cubic meters per ton are needed in Turkmenistan, 3,000 in Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan. So we could legitimately ask whether this is a right choice from a food security perspective. Of course, this generates a huge amount of cash, But from a water perspective, again, if we are food insecure, do we also want to go for cotton cultivation? This is, I don't have the answer, but this is a question that can be asked. So you can really separate this type of cultivation in the lowland, like I said, like cash or market-oriented cultivations. But when we move, sorry, to the mountains of Central Asia, we have a different picture. There in the mountains, we cultivate potatoes, wheat, alfalfa, and some vegetables, because this is no longer about incomes, but it's about subsistence in the mountains. So we have two different paradigms between lowlands and highlands. In the highlands or in the mountains, if you prefer, we are really split it between sustainability and vulnerability, because every household cultivate what they need. Not 100%, of course, they always need to buy sugar and some processed food, but it's not about selling the products. If you go and live in some cities such as Horog or Morgab, you rarely find products being cultivated in Pamir being sold on the market, in the bazaar. These products come from outside. It means that people consume what they cultivate, which means that they are also very fragile because they have less incomes and less protections against climate crises or all sort of crises that I will describe in few slides. So we need to understand these crop choices, which are very different from lowlands to highlands. For that reason, our institute and my colleagues Aslam Kalamov and Aziz Ali Khan have been trying for a few years now, actually for 10 years, to cultivate new varieties of wheat and potatoes in the mountains of Pamir. The idea was to understand, okay, how can we adapt the crop choices to the new need and to the new climate conditions? So this must be assessed through real plot trials on the field. And this is a picture from a field that we had in Iskashim, south of Pamir, in front of Afghanistan, where there is a demand for new wheat, or gandum in Persian, varieties. And it's really interesting to always see that a simple choice of new cultivation or new wheat variety has lots of implication. It's not only about producing food, but when you talk to the farmers, they also ask for varieties which have long straws, because we want the grains, of course, for food and flour, but we need long straws also to feed the cattle. So there are lots of characteristics to take into consideration, and adapting again crop choices to changing water resources must go through such kind of trials. In that particular case, the results are being published right now, but it showed out that the Chinese and Pakistan varieties showed the stronger yields in that particular region. However, it was preferable to go for crossbreed with local and foreign varieties if you want to achieve this, grain yield and long straw objectives. So again, agronomic and genomic work are ongoing at the center to go into that direction. We also have had some trials in Afghanistan, in the city of Bamiyan, in northeast Afghanistan, where we did several things. We first mapped all the cultivated areas using remote sensing to understand what people cultivate there. So it's important to start with these quantitative figures. And in Bamiyan, in Afghanistan, we cultivate potatoes, wheat, and alfalfa. Fine. But then we conducted surveys with farmers there, and we asked them, why do you cultivate potatoes, wheat, and alfalfa, and why potato dominates there? They told us that it is a traditional choice in that region. So it's it's important to understand these drivers. Why do we cultivate this instead of other things? But in the case of potatoes, potatoes dominate there because there is a very strong market and it's very profitable. However, the potatoes require too much water given the local water resources. So, similar to many other places in the region and in the world, we decide to cultivate, the most profitable crops instead of adapting to the real water resources. And we did a little forecast for the next 100 years in that specific region of Bamiyan. not many surprise, but of course temperature will increase with a high level of certainty. But at the same time, total precipitation will decrease for the next 100 years. Therefore, potatoes might not be the right choice for the coming years. And we try with some trials and with our agronomists to advertise, well, not advertise, but to recommend new crop choices which are more adapted to the future climate conditions. And in the case of Bamiyan, it was recommended to cultivate groundnuts, maize, beans, cowpeas, sorghum, millet, and eggplants, for example, which are more adapted to water resources which will be under stress. So here is a real combination of different approaches: climate modeling, surveys, mapping, and a bit of agronomy. I really like this picture because this shows the food security to its limits in Central Asia. This is a greenhouse in the city, the village of Jelondi in eastern Pamir, where in winter at 3,600 meters elevation high, almost 4,000 basically. And we do have cucumber and tomatoes being cultivated. This picture was taken in February because in Jelondi we have hot springs, natural hot springs. So the farmers use this natural heating system to create and generate crops from greenhouses. This is not only a particular case, but I always like to show this example to show how extreme the ways can be to tackle the food insecurity in these regions. That's another picture which I really like also. It's probably actually the highest field of controlled fields of Central Asia. We are in Morgab, well, next to Morgab, where we have a site for permafrost melt monitoring. And there we have farmers who every year cultivate forage using irrigation, gravity irrigation from snow and permafrost melts there. So it's very, very arid areas with less than 50 millimeters per year. So this is extremely low, but still in those areas, we have needs for forage productions, and any small source of water is always being used in these conditions. So these are very extreme examples which I always like to bring to the table. Another, of course, layer of challenge in the region, especially Pamir, is the monetary poverty, which is less than 2.15 USD per day, which is considered, of course, as poor. So the farmers and the landowners do not have necessary all the incomes necessary to purchase agricultural inputs and improve the productivity of their lands. They also highly rely on remittance dependency, from abroad, and migration of labor can have also had an impact on the productivity. The young generation is less interested into agriculture. Some of them also left to other countries, well, until recently, to Russia to work, which means that there is a decreasing labor mass of labor in the mountains, which is also something that must be taken into consideration. And some of us have been working on those questions. Of course, the food security and insecurity tour of Central Asia will not be complete without talking about the rangelands. Food security of Central Asia largely depends on that, on the livestock. Rangelands represents 65% of the surface of Central Asia, which is huge. But as I think you all know, we have very serious problems of degradation every year due to overgrazing. And I think the picture on the right side illustrates that quite well. And these degradations are estimated to represent every year almost 5 million USD per year of loss. So this is also an issue that we have observed in Afghanistan, also using remote sensing. This is the Amu Darya basin of Afghanistan, along the border with Tajikistan and Badakhshan. And there we had a project 5 years ago on the degradation of the rangelands. And it was clear that this part experienced a degradation on 15% of its surface since 2000. This was due to declining precipitation, both liquid and solid, rain and snow, but it's also due to high livestock density, as you know, and it degrades the soil. However, we all know this about the rangeland degradation, but to bring a little bit of optimism, in that particular region, we have observed reverse trends on the last 26 years, actually. Recovery is possible in the rangelands if you give a rest to the land and if you have the proper land management. So these are often discussed in conferences, and this is a very good example here. So, for example, the blue pixels that you can see on the map represent the places where the rangelands have been recovering due to proper management. So improvements are possible. That's the take-home message. If I keep going, because I was talking about decreasing precipitation in this region, let me talk a little bit about the upstream now. What is happening in terms of snow, rains, and glacier dynamics? Because we often hear those words, but it's nice to see a little bit in details of what is going on up there. So the first question that should be asked, in our opinion, is where does the water come from in Amu and Sir Daria catchments? And it comes from snow melt. 65% of the discharge of Amu Daria and Sir Daria, which cross very significant agricultural systems, come from snow melt. This is very important, 65%. There is often the assumption that most of the water comes from the ice, glacier ice melts, but it's actually much less than this. The ice melts is less than 10%. So sorry, less than 25%. So snow is very important. It was until recently quite understudied, but there are some progresses. Snow is very important, but it's also very variable. So from one year to another, we can have very different amount of snow, which means very different, patterns in the discharge. So they're always difficult to forecast. However, if you look at the past and the future somehow to midterm, it seems that Central Asia, in terms of climate change, is getting warmer, of course, but also wetter. So it's not necessarily drier, actually. So it's a little bit complex, and I will show you some plots after which illustrate that better. But we have indeed decreasing snowfall, but at the same time, we have increasing temperature, which can also lead to wetter conditions. When I talk about snow, it's not only the depths of snow. What we monitor with the center, with the institute, so in Eastern Pamir, is how much water do we have in it, because we can have a very snowy year, but a dry water content in the snowpack. For example, if I have 1 meter of snow, it doesn't mean that I have 1 meter of liquid water once it's melted. So that's something that we measure, because we work a lot with energy sector in that particular catchment of Pamir. It's called Gund Basin. And some stakeholders from the energy sector, they want to know a little bit of how much water they will have in their river, to produce hydroelectricity. But it also has very big consequences for the agricultural system and irrigation planning. I will, long story short, in this part, in these maps, the red pixels show that the snow water equivalent is decreasing. So we have drier condition. Drier snow means for a farmer that the melting will happen earlier during the year, maybe a month earlier, before the peak of snow melt was, let's say, in May. Now it's rather in April. But as a farmer in Horog, for example, well, we don't have much farmers in Horog, but in the villages around it, it means that I will have to irrigate longer. Instead of starting from May, my irrigation season, I will have to start a month before. And this is where estimation of snow water equivalent are important, because it helps to understand on the long term what are the changes. In some very particular cases, we have increasing snow water equivalent, but I will skip that part for now. Of course, we have other types of rain patterns with decreasing rainfalls, but I will go pretty fast on that. But what is important to understand is that due to this increasing temperature in the region, we have a shift from snow to rain. It rains more than it used to snow, actually. So this also have impacts on the irrigation calendars, because it means that the water comes at different time compared to the past. And this is perhaps why we need to adapt irrigation calendars, but also the crop choices, perhaps. Of course, yeah, like I said, temperature increase. These are data from the city of Horog for the last 123 years, and it is, yeah, it's clear. I mean, you can see this type of plots in many presentations that temperature are increasing, but this means that the growth length duration has increased by 10 days due to this increasing temperature and heat waves in this region. So there is a need for more irrigation if we want to sustain the productivity. This is already happening, and this will increase in the future. So perhaps if we have this presentation in 50 years from now, we'll probably see increasing of growth length duration by, I don't know, 30 days compared to the past. Cryosphere. So I talked about the snow and the rain, but of course the glaciers. I don't want to minimize their role because of course they are important in the region, and they are very good proxies to tell us about the temperature regimes and precipitation, liquid solid regimes in Pamir and Tian Shan. I think it's not a surprise for you. That's yeah, the glaciers are melting at different rates, we should say, but from the 60s up to now, you can see the plot which was produced by our colleagues Barodun and Paul. That's all the mass balances, which is the equivalent of the volume, let's say, of the glaciers are decreasing. This is really clear. You can look at different glaciers localized with different responses to increasing temperature, but overall, yes, the ice is melting. And like I said, the snow is decreasing in favor of rain. And these are perhaps the most important consequences of such changes. These are projections of discharge for the coming 100 years. This was produced by Cure and al. In 2013, but we have been doing the same work in Gunt. And it tells us how much water we'll have in our rivers of Amu Darya, Sir Darya, and others, based on climate change scenarios in the future. So based on more or less optimistic scenarios. In any case, the discharge, and this is where it might be a little bit counterintuitive, will increase because with warmer temperatures, the ice will keep melting, right? So the glacier will keep releasing liquid water, but this is only up to the 40s or let's say the 60s of the coming century. So basically it's tomorrow, right? So at the moment, if we observe increasing discharge in the river, it doesn't mean that the climate change, let's say, is in favor of our needs. It means the opposite, actually. The ice is melting very fast and the discharge is increasing, because after that, the discharge decreases once the ice will have totally or partially disappeared. We'll have decreasing discharge and we'll go back to more arid weather conditions and climate conditions. So this is important to have this in mind, and this is what we always try to present in our work with Tajik government, for example. Like, yes, we'll have more water, but again, it's only for 20, 30 years from now. And if we want to really have a solid strategic irrigation adaptation system or energy adaptation system, we must take into consideration the red arrow, what comes next, what comes the day after tomorrow, actually. And it's a decrease of the discharge. Doesn't mean that the rivers will be dry at all, but it means that we might want to revise, for example, the cotton choice in Dongara, let's say. So I keep going with the factors which affect the food security. So we've seen the climate trends and other factors. And like I said in the introduction, we have natural hazards which can severely impact the food security of Central Asia. And this is an example of Pamir, where we had a debris flow. Well, we have many debris flows there, but this one was particularly striking. You can see all the muddy parts next to the river. It was not there before. And around that house, which is covered, we had fields and potato and wheat cultivation. So I think the picture speaks by itself. The cultivated lands can be frequently covered by debris flows. This is the same with snow avalanches, where we've been working quite effectively, I would say, because we have lots of avalanches in this region. And this is an example of wet, massive avalanches filmed from inside a gary next to Horog. So The reason why I'm showing this video is, well, first off, it's very graphic, but also you have to imagine that all this volume of snow, which represents millions cubic meters of snow, end up on cultivated lands down there, if not on villages. So we often think that avalanche can destroy houses or block roads, which is true, but they can also cover cultivated lands for the entire period of time of agricultural time. So avalanches are also a threat to food security. They also kill the livestock. For example, we have in Himalaya and Central Asia, we are working with our partners from ICIMOD on an inventory of snow avalanches, and we found out that since the 70s, almost 2,000 livestock have been killed in only 24 big avalanches events. So this is an issue that must be taken into consideration. I think also these images speak by themselves. We are in Afghanistan from a Tajik border, and you can see the multiple deposits of avalanches covering the fields of that village. So we could say, okay, this is a marginal issue. This is true, but these lands, which are very, very small, are the only lands that these people have. And if you remove, let's say, 5% or 10% of this land by covering it with an avalanche, then you lose quite a significant amount of productivity. So that's why it is important to look at snow avalanches and their impact on food security. So we mapped them, the avalanches, on the last 30 years. We created a model called snow avalanches frequency estimation, and it helps to understand till where the avalanche go down the valley on the last 33 years using remote sensing. And based on that, you can see and count, okay, what plot of wheat or potato or whatever is being every year or once every 5 years covered by snow avalanches. And based on that, we could also think of a vision in the future. We need to protect the roads from hazards, the villages also, yes. But if we think and make the link with food security, we also need to protect our cultivated lands up there. Yeah, and on the right, there is an estimation of the recent trends over the last 30 years in only few small catchments, which are actually mostly located in Pamir. We have an increase of a number of snow avalanches, but yeah, there's an increase of wet avalanches, which means spring avalanches at the time where we have this type of green fields. So this type of avalanches that we have on the left are called slush or wet avalanches, and they are apparently happening more and more due to these warmer and wetter conditions. So they might increase their impact on food security already. So I will come to the conclusion. This is the end of the tour, I would say, where we understand the multiple challenges, crop choices, socioeconomic pressures, rangeland, infrastructures, hazards, snow, rain, and glacier dynamics. All of this at once have impacts on the food security. So we cannot solve any food security if we only look at one of these separately. Everything comes together at once, and this is why precisely food security is a very complex challenge. So I've talked about many factors and work that we've done, but there are many things that we haven't done also at the center. And I like to finish this presentation with a sentence once a farmer told me in Pamir, which sums up absolutely everything. Without modeling, without remote sensing, or without surveying, he said, we have lands, we have potatoes, we have wheat and animals, we just don't have job. And I think that's it. I think it sums up the situation pretty well. What he means by that is that we have the resources, although we can discuss that, but we don't have the financial income to purchase agricultural inputs or other new varieties more adapted to new climate conditions. And for that reason, the food security is still at risk or on the edge, always on the edge, let's say, because like we saw, we have anthropogenic factors such as poor power of purchase, like I said, in landlocked valleys. These landlocked valleys are very vulnerable to climate variability, hazards, and many other things. Production can be improved by protecting the infrastructure, improving irrigation and roads, and maybe adapting crop choices. But on this, I would like to highlight that when we say that irrigation efficiency can be improved, it doesn't mean that every plots of Pamir and Tian should be covered by a drip irrigation system, for example. That's not what we try to say in the research, because, for example, drip irrigation is so is so costly that nobody can really afford that, and there are lots of questions behind the drip irrigation. So technology will probably not be the answer to food security, but a clear understanding of the local challenges and a clear understanding of what people are ready to do to change maybe crop choices or irrigation calendars. Only the calendars could already make significant steps. Water resources, of course, like I said, climate change has its parts, but it's not the issue. Climate change is not the issue. It is a consequence of a global scale challenge that cannot be solved at the scale of Pamir or at the scale of Tian Shan. But the only thing that we must do is to adapt. Well, of course, we should do more than this, but on a short term, adaptation to this shift, for example, from snow to rain, which is a big challenge, is the most important thing that we can do. So in terms of very, very briefly, recommendations, in a possible world, we could improve the irrigation network or calendars, diversify the crop choices, choose alternative solutions such as greenhouses using hot spring water. But this is very, very specific, adaptation. That, I mean, if you don't have a hot spring, this is not possible. But in some cases, it is, and perhaps we should go into that direction whenever possible. And securing lands and roads to natural hazards. Like I said, the hazards cut the disconnects the road and can destroy buildings, but we must also think in the future of how to protect the lands from avalanches and how we can better harvest. It's another topic, but so next steps in terms of interdisciplinary research for us, and I mean, and not only actually for for the scientific community in this area, is to work on the diet, nutrition, and self-sufficiency at household level. I know that there are many very exciting and interesting work into that direction, but we need to do more. For us at the Mestre, we keep working on where the water will come from in the future, because if we understand whether it comes from the snow, the rain, the permafrost, or the glacier, we understand also when the water will come to the river, and then we'll have a better picture of how calendar of irrigation should look like in a climate changed world. Crops and cereal varieties trials in reasonable locations is another way to address climate change. And well, to adapt to climate change, we need to keep trying new varieties of potatoes, local ones by preference, or wheat as well. And there is a very very strong need for agronomic work into that direction, and also development of food processing industry. But that's also another topic that would deserve a full presentation. So I stop here. Thank you for your time. This is a picture from the Caracal Lake in the Eastern Pamir, and yeah, I'm happy to take questions if any. Thank you.